What's going on, everybody? It's RoyJ coming at you with a brand new video. And over the past couple of weeks at my locals, I've been playing Branded once more, using a little bit of a different list from the last one that I played, and by a little bit I actually mean a lot now that I think about it. And I've been seeing a lot of success with this list. I actually went undefeated 2 weeks in a row, which was actually pretty surprising considering my track record before that wasn't very great on any deck, much less Branded. And between Cash getting hit and the Puppet Lock still being alive and well, I thoroughly think that Branded's going to be a top contender this format, at least if the representation shows up with it. I know we have a lot of people on Unchained right now, so. But with that being said, I wanted to showcase to you my brand new list that I have put together for Branded. A lot of the core stuff is still the same, but there's a few changes that make it a lot more resilient to disruptions, which is one of the things that the deck has always been fragile for. With that being said, let's go ahead and get right into my Branded deck profile for the September 2023 format. Starting us off, of course, we have the Despias, with 3 copies of Aluber, 1 copy of Tragedy, and 1 copy of Ad Libitum. This is pretty standard, honestly. Overall, this hasn't really changed since the last list. Adlib does end up getting sided out a lot now that I think about it, but it's definitely still a card that you kind of have to play if you want to play the deck to its maximum potential. Even if it is a bit of a brick sometimes, you can at least still fuse it off with like Cartesia effect, and then special back a Despia from your grave, or Banished, or a Fusion, or something like that. We're also playing 1 copy of Guiding Quem the Virtuous, and 2 copies of Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous. So I was actually only on 1 Cartesia for a while, mainly because I just didn't want to drop $40 on another one. But now after the Megatins, she's actually super affordable, and I realized just how good the second one was, because I was kind of coping like, oh, you only really need 1. And while you do only need 1, the second one is just so good, because not only does it make it more consistent to actually hard open her instead of having to search her, but she's also just super good to have as a follow-up in case you need to banish your first one, because Cartesia is really just the heart and soul of this deck. There are so many different locks, like things like King Calamity, that you can just completely bypass and continue playing by normal summoning Cartesia and just passing your turn with the other cards in your hand. She just does so much for the deck by being a quick effect. And then Quem, you really only need the 1 because you don't really want to break your hand up with normal summons. And once she's done it like once, she's really fulfilled her purpose and you can kind of just get rid of her. We're still only playing the 1 Lubellion and the 1 Saronir for our Bestial package. I was citing an additional like Magnuma, Baldrake, and Druisworm. I say was because again I'm switching decks, but still am technically as long as this deck is built. But I don't really need to main more than just these 2. I mean, Lubellion does his job, and then once he's placed the Branded Lost, he's kind of just dead in the water. And then Saronir is technically a disruption, but also mostly there just to get the dump effect, though you can also use it to set up your Lubellion and then get the dump, or honestly, I've actually used it to go for a lot of OTKs because the deck doesn't have the most amazing OTK potential. The Magnuma, Druisworm, and Baldrake in the side are actually really helpful though, and they help me win the Unchained matchup that I actually ended up having that you can see on a live duel. For Albaz and all of his buddies, we're playing 3 copies of Fallen of Albaz, 1 copy of Albion the Shrouded Dragon, and 1 copy of Tri-Brigade Mercurier. Again, very standard here. I'm not playing like the Spriggan's kit or anything like that, and I am only on 1 Mercurier because the Rinbrim combo is kind of mediocre, if not just kind of bad, with like the opening Lubellion and a Luber or whatever, and like dumping a Mercurier for Rinbrim. It's just really weird. Not to mention, I'm not playing Gold Sark or anything like that, so having a double Mercurier isn't really necessary. It ends up breaking more than anything. If it could trigger off of being sent to grave, like Tragedy as well, then I'd consider the second one again, but honestly, the 1 is just perfectly fine. And 3 Albaz by now is basically mandatory, because even if the stuff on top of your deck isn't getting ripped by Cash anymore, just having the 3rd Albaz just helps the grind so much. Not to mention, opening Albaz going second is really not bad at all. And then for the miscellaneous dudes, we have the 1 Gimmick Puppet Nightmare and the 1 Dark Magician. Yeah, these guys are bricks a lot of the time, though they still do their function if they're in hand and you have your combo stuff in hand. Gimmick Puppet, it's something that a lot of Branded players are either siding or just outright dropping, even though the list didn't hit it at all. I kind of disagree on that. I think this is literally the best thing that the deck can do, even if the deck is fine without it. But it's just like, how are you gonna pass up a free W like that unless you just don't like it because it gets boring? And then Dragoon is still way too powerful not to play in my opinion as well. For the hand traps, fairly minimal here. It's just 3 copies of Ash and 3 copies of Imperm. I don't know if my last list had it, but I was also maining 3 copies of Droll before I changed the list up. But then I was just like, Droll's kind of fallen off a little bit because people aren't playing decks like Monodium or anything like that much anymore, because almost everything has jumped over to Unchained, which half the time can just play through the Droll. So I was like, I might as well just play a different flex spot, which we'll get into later. Ash and Imperm are still 2 of the better hand traps you could play. Another one I would recommend, though, that I would definitely play if I had the room, honestly, is Nib. I definitely have that cited. I think Nib is very, very good right now, and you can actually utilize it for some of your other combo stuff because it is a light that you can send to summon Albion. That is it for the monsters. On to the spells. 3 copies of Branded Fusion and 3 copies of Branded Opening, alongside 3 copies of Fusion Deployment and 3 copies of Nadir Servant. So these are all of the 3 ofs, other than like 1 card that again we'll get into in a little bit. But these are fairly standard for the top 2. For the bottom 2, I know Fusion Deployment is usually ran at 3. I've seen some people bump it down to 2 though. The big thing though is definitely the Nadir Servant, because even though I'm not playing the Kit or like even the Maximus or anything like that, I'm still playing the Nadir Servant because it just helps you play through disruptions so well. If you get your Branded Fusion Ash, this can bare minimum set you up like a Mirror Jade and like some other form of disruption, because you can dump something like a Lulu Lilith, that's like the main target that I dump off of this, to summon Cartesia during the end phase, and you can either add Albaz if you've already normal summoned, or even a Quem if you haven't, so you can actually set up a pretty decent end board on your opponent's turn, off of technically just 2 cards if you count the Branded Fusion getting Ash and the Nadir Servant. Also a reminder, this can actually add from Grave as well, so you can use it to play through Droll. The one-ofs are, of course, 1 Branded Lost, 1 Branded in Red, and 1 Branded Retribution. All fairly standard here as well. Branded Lost is one of the most insane cards ever printed. Branded in Red can just help you make that Guardian Chimera, or a few other plays. I've actually used it to make Dragoon in one of my most recent games. And then Retribution, of course, is Retribution. So for the card that I've been mentioning a few times, I'm actually playing 2 copies of Book of Moon and 1 Eclipse. The only reason it's not just 3 Book of Moon is because I don't own a 3rd Book of Moon. I literally realized that when I was looking through my binder. So I'm just playing the 1 Eclipse in its place, though technically this can be used as a board breaker, though all of them can be used to pick apart boards as well. These are mostly here to protect things like Aluber as well as Cartesia from things like Imperm, because you can actually still resolve Cartesia, of course, even if she's one of your only fusion targets, because you can still fuse with face downs, and so using Book of Moon is kind of just free in this deck. And then finally, for the non-branded one-ofs, just 1 Foolish Burial and 1 Called by the Grave. Not too much to explain here. Foolish dumps Tragedy, adds your Aluber, and Called by, of course, stops Ash Blossom. That is it for the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, we of course have 2 copies of Mirror Jade, 2 copies of Albion, and 1 copy of Lubellion. This is fairly standard here, especially with things like Diablosis gone and now Cash in general kind of like out of the picture for the most part. Lubellion at 1 is a perfectly acceptable number. We're also playing the 1 Albin the Sanctifier Dragon for our Puppet Lock or for other shenanigans as well. 1 Rinbrum because its graveyard effect is really good, even if I almost never summon her. 1 Titaniclad because this actually summons your Quem during the end phase, which is really, really nice. 1 Gronguignol for your Cartesia and Gimmick Puppet plays. Also, funnily enough, in that Unchained video, I used this to go into the Albion after dumping the Gimmick Puppet, which was really, really funny because this is a light spellcaster. 1 copy of Despian Queritus for a target off Gronguignol and a hard make. 1 Masquerade for time and for other life point pushing purposes. 1 Despian Lulu Lilith for both the Gronguignol effect and, as I mentioned, the Nadir Servant, really, really good for that. 1 Dragostapelia because it's Dragostapelia, not too much to explain. 1 Dragoon because it's still one of the best end board pieces you can have and also one of the best board breakers. And 1 Guardian Chimera because holy shit, this is one of the best fusions ever printed. That's going to do it for my branded list for September 2023, y'all. I really hope y'all enjoyed. I've been really enjoying playing this deck, though I am going to pivot away from it for a little bit, so I can get some practice in with Labyrinth for once Age of Overlord comes out. I really want to play that deck when the new support drops. But funnily enough, Branded is probably the best deck that I currently own other than that. Like, Bird Up is just kind of alright, and then a lot of the other decks I play, or like that I have, are just memes or outdated, or kind of just for fun more than anything. But I've been really enjoying playing Branded, and I think it's a really fun deck to play, even if the Puppet Lock is kind of boring. But that's just my opinion. Let me know yours down in the comments below, because that's going to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like, as I'll split this video and the channel into two recommended. And if you like this content and return like it, like the rest of my deck profiles, I'm going to try and have a pre-Age of Overlord Labyrinth deck profile up next week. Then perhaps consider subscribing, because we're going to 5,000 subscribers by the end of 2023. Not to mention it supports the channel or anything else, and it's absolutely free. Also, if you want to support me directly while getting some awesome TCG merchandise in the process, check out Tapio cards in the link down below. Use code Aurora5 for 5% off your purchase at checkout and support me financially. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.